Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 825B, and today's date is November 23rd, 2015, and the title of this episode is The U.S. Push for War is Now Appearing on All Fronts. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, since the event in Paris, we've been noticing, and we've noticed this before when there was the false flag in Canada, we saw the false flag in Australia, the Charlie Hebdo false flag, and now this recent one in Paris. Basically, each time one of these happen, we notice the governments put more troops on the ground. They want people to stay inside, don't peek out your windows, don't take any pictures. Basically, they're controlling the public. And what we see is governments continually coming out with more and more laws that control what you hear, what you can say, and what you see. Because they need everyone to be controlled at this point. Here in the United States, it is very difficult for the government to continually try to push different laws to basically violate the rights of the people, because they can't create a law that overrides it. They only can create laws that infringe upon it, which basically is a violation of our rights any way you look at it. But there was a Pew Research which was recently done on a broad survey of American people on the subject of offensive speech. And it doesn't really bode well for the future of America. And the respondents were asked if the government should step in on certain speech that might be offensive. Now, I'm sorry, but every religion, every culture, every person, being offended is very subjective. What offends you might not offend me. And nowhere in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights is the government supposed to step in and tell you what is free speech and what isn't free speech, what offends someone, what doesn't offend someone. I mean, we're all adults here. People are being offended all day long. This is being a part of a free society. And when you speak to someone, yes, it might offend someone, but this allows people to have a debate. This allows people to talk about what's been going on. If you remove that, that's completely gone. And when the government starts stepping in and it tells you that you cannot say these words, you cannot say this because it offends this group, because we said so, and it offends that group, what you're left with is controlled speech. You're left with no longer being free to express yourself. And this is what each one of these governments are trying to do at this point. They're trying to create a way to control your speech. I mean, there was a book and a movie called The Giver, and basically they had control speech. They called it precision of speech. And every time you said something wrong, they corrected you. And people really couldn't have arguments. They couldn't have debates. They couldn't express themselves. They were all controlled in a certain way. And this is what the government is trying to do right now. Actually, if this was able to go forward, you would not see anything on the internet whatsoever, because everyone pretty much on the internet is trying to express themselves. And if they set up these teams that will look into offensive speech, guess what? Everyone will be pointing the finger at everyone else, and all of this would be completely gone. And this is what it's all about. It's about controlling the people. If you notice, every time there's some type of false flag, they control the people. Stay indoors. Don't take pictures. The troops will be on the street. Don't even look at outside your windows. We're not going to let you see certain websites. Like France, they're looking at a way to block certain alternative media websites, so people don't see this. They only hear the official narrative of whatever the government wants them to hear. And we're starting to see this all around the world, where all these events are occurring. And it's spreading. Now, Europe is saying we need access to the SWIFT data to combat terrorism. Now, basically, they want full access to transactions. And you know the terrorists are not using these type of systems to create their terrorism, because most of this is being done by internal agencies and governments. And they're never going to find anything. What this is about is they want the information of where money is. Remember, governments, the central bankers, they need to take control of who has what money. And this is what it's really about. Because if you really look at it, you're trying to tell me to find these terrorists. Shouldn't they be looking at who's receiving the oil from the convoy of oil trucks? Because they've been telling us the Islamic State is making all this money by selling oil. Well, find out where the third parties are. You think they're using the SWIFT system for this? Most likely not. But they don't want to look into this because they're a part of this system. So right now, the SWIFT system has 2 computer servers, one in Europe and one in the United States. But Europe currently relies on the U.S. authorities to collect and analyze the vast amount of data flowing through the entire system. And all this data basically is analyzed by America of where all this is happening. If there was truly terrorists, and you want to believe the official story, they would not do it through this system. There are many other means to transact terrorism and funding. And if they really wanted to find where all this is coming from, follow the convoy of oil trucks, follow it into the country, and where this is happening. Now, the U.S. Treasury is continually telling us that they know how much, they know how it's being done, but they've done nothing to stop it whatsoever. And the question is why? Now, because of all of these events and terrorism being the main subject right now, the United Kingdom will be putting undercover police officers trained to spot people carrying out terrorist reconnaissance. This is starting to sound like Nazi Germany to me, where they were looking for certain groups and individuals that were not too favorable to the present government. And they wanted to root those people out. And we know these are the people they call terrorists. I mean, if you look at all the other countries throughout the Middle East and Ukraine, the people that do not agree with the government, the people that have grievances against the government, they are called terrorists. And we're starting to see that each one of these countries throughout Europe and here in the United States, we're starting to see that they're spying on their own people. They're looking for certain individuals that might not agree with the government, that might be meeting and looking to maybe have protests, maybe to take it a step further. And these are the people they're looking for at this point. This reminds me of Nazi Germany at this point. We're heading down the same exact path. Now, Venezuela is accusing the United States of industrial espionage to sabotage the oil industry. Not really surprising at this point, because we know the United States government needs to get into those countries that have oil to place the dollar on their natural resources, to keep the dollar propped up. And they've been trying to get into Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela with coup d'etats. They did this throughout Middle East. And the government of Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro, is investigating a report that the U.S. government has been spying on executives of the PDVSA. The oil industry is the backbone of the Venezuelan economy, and the U.S., for a long time, has been trying to sabotage the oil industry and defeat the government in order to steal the oil, which they have done in many of the countries. This is nothing new. They're trying to prop up the system. Now, many of the allegations are coming from The Intercept, and one of them is that the NSA intercepted the calls and emails of Rafael Ramirez, who served as the PDVSA's president from 2004 to 2014, and was the country's energy minister from 2002 to 2014. The Intercept report was based on an article dated March 2011 in an internal NSA newsletter that it said was obtained by Snowden. The NSA have obtained access to vast amounts of Venezuela's internal communications, And they have proof that, yes, the United States was trying to do this. And again, this is how the United States government central bankers play. They need to get into each one of these countries to prop up the system. They need to spread the debt around the world. They need to prop up the dollar to keep the system alive. But right now what's happening is the system is dying, and it's getting harder and harder to plan these coups d'etats. Now, out in Ukraine, we see things are really starting to accelerate there. And we know the Minsk II ceasefire agreement, it expires coming this end of December. We know Kiev right now has no plans to renew it. They might renew it, but at this point in time, they do not. And we see a lot of strange things occurring at this time in Ukraine. We understand that Ukraine is continually shelling the Donetsk, Lugansk area. The OSCE has actually come out and said, yes, this is where it is coming from. We see Yatsenyuk said that the Ukrainian government is temporarily prohibiting cargo traffic between Ukraine and Crimea. The decision was made today to do so during a government meeting. And we also see over the weekend, Crimea lost power. No power was coming from Ukraine into Crimea. Now, we understand Crimea is no longer part of Ukraine. They have been receiving power from Ukraine. And basically, there's about 1.39 million people without electric. And it looks like there's attacks on the infrastructure in Ukraine, which had their goal to cut off the power. And basically, they're still looking into what has happened. Now, there's a lot of people with no power whatsoever, and we've discussed this many, many times, that yes, when this false flag hits here in the United States, we will see power outages. It's already cooked into the plan. They've been warning about this. It's already planned out, and these people right now have no electricity. Hopefully they were prepared. Now, what's going on in Ukraine is they're preparing for a major offensive. We know the U.S. is in there training the National Guard and the armed forces. We know other nations are in there training and building up Ukraine's forces with lethal and non-lethal weapons. And right now, the instructors from the United States are training Ukrainian special operation troops in certain tactics. And the training has begun there. So we can see what's going on right now. The armed forces, these special op groups, are all being trained to go into the southeastern region. They shut the power off in Crimea. It might come back on. We'll have to wait and see. But a lot of the parts of the Crimea are completely down. And some parts have been brought back up. But this is all being done on purpose. We're in the month of November, coming to the end of November, heading into December, and we know the Minsk II basically expires at the time. And we're going to have to watch the situation very, very carefully. Out in the Pacific, we understand the United States is out there provoking China continuously. Well, now Japan is going to get involved with other nations around that area. And right now, Japan could provide Manila with large ships that will be used to patrol the South China Sea. Tokyo will consider dispatching its self-defense forces to the South China Sea. This is coming from Prime Minister Abe. And Japan and the United States are planning to basically sail in this area at least twice per quarter. Now, the U.S. is one thing when they basically sail around those islands. Bringing Japan into it, it is really going to provoke China. And this is what they want, because what we're seeing right now is war on all fronts. In the Pacific, in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Africa. It is happening everywhere. Now, out in the UK, the British government has said they spotted a Russian submarine off the west coast of Scotland. And basically, they're having French and Canadian patrol planes and Royal Navy ships to search for it, but they can't find the sub. This looks like it's more fear-mongering that they're trying to do, because you have to remember, if we go back a little bit in time, Sweden accused Russia of bringing a submarine near their territorial waters back in October of 2014. Then it turned out that the vessel spotted was actually just an average boat. But they used over 200 troops, helicopters, stealth ships, minesweepers, and it cost about $696 million for the operation, and they hiked the defense spending between 2016 and 2020 based on those reports, which turned out to be fake. And it looks like the UK is doing the same thing to up their defense budget, to put fear in the people. Right now, Putin has lifted the ban on uranium enrichment equipment to Iran. According to the document, the ban on supplying goods, materials, and equipment no longer applies to the exports of the enriched uranium from the Islamic Republic of Iran. So they're doing trading. And something very interesting out in Syria. We understand the United States government, central bankers, and Russia, and the coalition forces are all in this. Now, we know that Russia has been really bombing the Islamic State. They've been pushing them back. They've been destroying them. We know the Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States. They fund them with funds. They fund them with ammunition, military assets, and they protect the oil convoys. Now, on PBS NewsHour, which they did a report last week, they used two objective control videos made by Russian drones while Sukhoi bombers in Latakia bombed out oil storage facilities and many oil trucks, which they used on their convoys to deliver oil. Now, PBS didn't say these were Russian bombings. They said it was the United States, because there was a voiceover that went along with it, and it's making the American public believe that the United States is actually hitting the convoys of the Islamic State delivering oil. And what's very interesting about this is there's absolutely no videos whatsoever from the United States actually bombing the Islamic State and the convoys. So why didn't they produce these videos? Because at this point, most likely they're not bombing them whatsoever. Now, the U.S. is saying they are bombing them, but we have no proof of this whatsoever. And then we find out from another report that U.S. planes are now dropping leaflets warning the drivers to get out of the trucks now and run away from them before the United States bombs the convoy. Why in the world would they do this? Who do they think is driving the trucks? I guess what they're doing is they believe the Islamic State is not driving their own trucks and they must have hired drivers. I mean, what they're really doing here is they're protecting their proxy army. They need to show the world, because Russia has called them out on it. Russia is destroying the convoys, and the United States is sitting there, and they haven't hit the convoys in over a year. They couldn't find them. You know, these long trucks of oil going into Turkey. So now they have to prove that, yes, they're hitting the oil trucks. Now, of course, we haven't seen any videos just yet. So what they're doing is they're warning their proxy army, get out of the trucks because we're going to destroy them right now, to prove to the world that we are doing what Russia is doing right now. And this is what we're seeing at this point. Right now, they're saying that chemical weapons are being used in Syria, and this is a war crime. But what's very interesting about this is they're not saying the Islamic State is using the chemical weapons. They're not saying al-Qaeda is using the chemical weapons. They're pointing their fingers still at Assad as using the chemical weapons. And we know that Assad basically got rid of all his chemical weapons because he made an agreement with United States and Russia that he would remove all his chemical weapons. And we have proof and documentation that the Islamic State, al-Qaeda, and the Free Syrian Army have been using chemical weapons. Now, as we know, the Pentagon has been fudging the information about the Islamic State for a very long time, letting everyone believe that they were winning the war against the Islamic State, and we come to find out that the whole thing was made up. where they were letting the Islamic State, the proxy army of the United States government, expand and take more and more territory in Syria, because their plan was to basically squeeze Assad out and take the territory they wanted and pretty much tell everyone that this is no longer part of Syria, it's part of the Islamic State, and this is why we're going into this area. But we can see right now that that whole entire story has fallen apart. This was part of their plan, and right now Russia is continually bombing and pushing the Islamic State further and further east. And the United States is in a tough, very tough position right now, because they have two choices right now: to continually back the Islamic State, or make it look like they're working with Russia to get rid of the Islamic State, because the world is looking at the situation right now, wondering why the United States, the Pentagon, has been falsifying all this information. Now, Russia has been flying very close to the Turkish border, destroying the Islamic State. Of course, Turkey is giving them warnings, saying, please, you need to get away from here, and you need to immediately end the operation near our border. Now, John Kerry and Erdogan, they're trying to basically set up a safe zone between Turkey and Syria, so they have easy access for the Islamic State to move in and out, and to get them out if needed. And this is why they're trying to set up a safe cover zone there. And Kerry, of course, is out there covering his tracks, so is Obama, saying that I believe the Islamic State is going to be defeated. Well, Russia is already doing this, and what's happening is, as Russia continually pushes the Islamic State back, the United States is trying to basically take credit for all of this. They're using their videos. They're saying, yes, the Islamic State is being destroyed. Because what's happening is, they know they're backed into a corner. A lot of the Islamic State has been airlifted out. They've been brought to Libya and Yemen. And it looks like Obama is looking to basically switch off and use al-Qaeda right now and other terrorist organizations, because he's telling Russia, listen, you only need to go after the Islamic State. You don't have to go after the other terrorist groups. Which is absolutely ridiculous, because Russia said, along with Assad, we're going to remove all terrorism from the country. If you want this peace deal, all terrorism must be removed from the country, and the people must decide if Assad stays. Now, al-Qaeda put out a video thanking the U.S. for supplying anti-tank missiles. And what we're seeing right now is all the terrorist organizations are receiving weapons from the Free Syrian Army, from the Islamic State, the airdrops from the United States to these groups. And they're supplying them with many of these weapons. Some of the weapons that are being supplied are ground-to-air missile systems. Now, these aren't man-pads. These are the real deal that can take down jet planes. And this was the controversy with receiving weapons from Ukraine. And now Cyber came out saying that they hacked into the system, and they revealed information that clearly indicates that Qatar, the Ministry of Defense, has arranged supplies of Ukrainian air defense systems to Syria to help out the terrorist organizations, and they were shipping this via Bulgaria and Turkey. The U.S. officers in Qatar have approved the deals, and they're going to be getting the Pecora 2D system. And they're able to strike aircrafts at heights of 21 kilometers, which means they can hit a target, 13 miles in the sky? Very, very interesting in what they're trying to do, because what they're doing is they were trying to smuggle these systems in to take out the Russian jets, or maybe commercial airliners, to blame this on Assad or something else. And we can see this is what they're really pushing for. Now, we understand there was special operations going on in Brussels, and they had massive troops. They told people to stay inside. They told people, don't look out your windows, do not photograph anything. They have arrested 16 people. And of course, nobody had any weapons, nobody had any bombs. Actually, they had no evidence about anything whatsoever, and nothing was found. Basically, it was being used as a scare tactic. This is what the governments are doing at this point. John Kerry is out there. He is saying that a Paris-like terror attack is most likely inevitable here in the United States. He says it's probably not a question of if, it's a question of when, Kerry warned. Very interesting. Because what is happening at this point? Right now, this entire economy is crashing. The economies are falling apart. The United States government and the coalition forces are losing their footing in Syria. The Islamic State is being destroyed. They're backed into a corner. They're trying to get Europe together to help fight in Syria. They're bringing all forces into this centralized location, China, Russia, Europe, trying to kick off some type of war. And we know what's happening here is we had an event in Paris, which we might see another one occur maybe in Europe. And then eventually what's going to happen, it will come home to the United States. Now, when John Kerry says it's not a matter of if or when, this is a signal letting us know they have prepared for the next event. They are ready to go forward with it. They're just waiting for the green light. And I don't think it's going to be much longer before we do see something. And we know from previous warnings from the government officials or government employees that it will be coupled with cyber attacks and physical attacks. And we can see at this point the United States government central bankers, they are running out of options. And as days and weeks go by and things get worse and worse and they're backed into a corner, like I said before, they're coming out with their claws and they will be ready to attack because they have no other alternative at this point. They need an event to cover up everything, and this is what they're planning for right now. And this is why when we look at all of this information and the situation that we're seeing right now, everyone needs to be on their toes. Everyone needs to be ready to understand what is happening here in the United States and across the world. Because once this event hits, we will be pushed into war. The president will come out and he will say it is war, just like President Hollande. And this will be the beginning of World War III. Now, of course, what has to happen here is they need a horrific event. They need to have the American people brought together. They need to scare the people as much as they possibly can to make them do something they normally wouldn't do, and that is go off to war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.